G'day and welcome to the Lyle Shelton Show. It's great to be coming to you from the wonderful city of Rockhampton in central Queensland, where I've just conducted another one of the launches of my book, I kid you not, Notes from 20 Years in the Trenches of the Culture Wars. And it was a great privilege to have my friend Senator Matt Canavan, the Liberal National Senator for Queensland, launch the book here, and we had a great night with that. But I took the opportunity of meeting up with Matt in his home city to have a discussion and an interview for this show, and I'm sure you'll enjoy what we had to discuss. We ranged from everything from political correctness through to economic policy, the energy debate that is raging in our country, and also we talked about family tax policy and how to give a better and fairer deal to families through the taxation system. I hope you'll enjoy this discussion. I certainly enjoyed catching up with Matt. He is a very intelligent man. He's one of the brightest lights in the federal parliament, and I'm sure he's got a massive future ahead of him. So sit back, relax, enjoy this discussion, and I'll be back with you after this. Senator Matt Canavan, welcome to the Lyle Shelton Show.
Well, great to be here, Lyle. Good to join you in Rocky.
Exactly, great to be in your hometown in central Queensland. Matt, you and I have known each other for a few years. I think we first met probably in Aussie's Cafe when you were Barnaby Joyce's staffer. Aussie's Cafe, for those who don't know, is sort of social central of Parliament House in Canberra.
Yeah. It's I suppose that would probably be something like 10 years ago now. Started working for Barnaby in 2010. And I'm sure we would have been pretty heavily involved with you on a range of issues, as you would have been at the time as the head of the Australian Christian Lobby. Yeah, and I might have even been 2IC at that stage when we first met. It was a few years ago, but I do remember vividly in Aussie's Cafe you pulling out your iPhone and showing me a YouTube clip of the life of Brian. Do you remember what that was about? Yeah, the box, wasn't it, for the womb, right? You know, where's it going to gestate?
Exactly. And this was before the Safe Schools program even came along.
No, it's classic,
Stan saying, I want to be a woman.
That's right, classic scene. And they were well ahead of their time.
They were well ahead of their time, and we were ahead of our time. We had no idea this debate was coming down the road.
Yeah, and it's funny now you see, I think both John Cleese and, was it Eric Idle the other day, or one of the, or is Eric still alive? I can't remember. Well, I think another of the Monty Python crew has joined John Cleese in coming out against political correctness, and
good on him.
You know how you just can't make a joke anymore, can you? If we keep this up, but yeah, they were lampooning back then the sort of redefinition of language, effectively.
So you've been politically incorrect.
Which we see all the time.
You've been politically incorrect even before you became a senator. How have you found navigating the PC world of the Canberra bubble?
Look, I suppose I'm in the lucky position that. I don't rely on the approval of the ABC or the masters of public opinion for my political brand. In fact, I revel in not having their approval, if you like. You've probably seen recently a colleague of mine, Claire Chandler, is in a bit of hot water with the Tasmanian, the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner or some such, criticising her for having the temerity to suggest that female bathrooms should be reserved for people of the female sex. And I was joking with her the other day that is there any way you can get that Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commissioner to take complaint out on me as well? Because, it's been great for Claire's profile, and I know it must be a little bit frustrating to have to deal with these things, but we need to take up the fight, and I don't mind the opposition. That means you're having an impact.
Yeah, no, and she's been fantastic. I've been following that case from a distance. It's the same crowd there in Tasmania that took Archbishop Julian Porteous, same commission, and I understand just recently that they dropped her case because she refused to sign a confidentiality agreement as part of the conciliation. So good on her for standing up to them.
Claire's case,
they've withdrawn the complaint. So, but you may not be aware of the complaint against me, and this is breaking here on the Lyle Shelton Show. But I'm being sued by a couple of drag queens here in Queensland.
Heard that. Yep.
Similar sort of process. So there's a lot of stuff to go on. But what can we do to try and ensure that we keep free speech open, so that people like Senator Chandler and myself and others don't get dragged before these kangaroo courts?
Look, it's a difficult question. Obviously, I'd prefer not to have these laws in place. We're trying ourselves here in in the Commonwealth Parliament to protect free speech or free speech in regards to religious freedom, at least. I'm not so sure, though, sometimes that these are the best avenues, because effectively, I suppose what we're setting up is, we're going down the route of, if you can't beat them, join them. We've got a whole bunch of laws that are against, that restrict free speech, where it might offend people effectively, and the word offend is used in Section 18C, for example. And now we're sort of doing something similar with religious freedom, so you can't offend people on religious grounds. So, I think that's better than nothing. In some respects, though, perhaps we should reconsider whether some kind of Bill of Rights is necessary, especially post-COVID, and the restrictions we've seen placed on people in that regard. Look at the situation in Ballarat with the mum. I can't quite remember her name, but in her pajamas, getting arrested for a Facebook post
in front of her kids.
She didn't do anything. She didn't attend the protest. It was simply for something she had said online. Now, I know a Bill of Rights opens a whole other can of worms, but that arrest couldn't have happened in the United States of America. They would not have been able to do that because
interesting. Well, Victoria actually does have a Bill of Rights. It has a Charter of Rights, which is the same thing, and yet she was not protected there.
I presume that haven't seen the Victorian Bill of Rights, but I presume it doesn't have a capture-all sort of protection of free speech, such as the US bill. So. That's, I suppose, obviously the devil's in the detail here. It's what you're protecting.
It's interesting. I didn't anticipate getting into an argument with you over Bill of Rights, but one of the things that I was engaged in at ACL before your time, before I think you even came to work with Barnaby, was what was really a 2-year battle against Kevin Rudd's proposed Charter of Rights, and we worked very hard with people like Bob Carr, former New South Wales Premier, to try and stop that, and we succeeded. That was one campaign that we won. Because of the concern about transferring power from the legislature to the judiciary, which is essentially what a Charter of Rights would do. But
well, look, we in the same-sex marriage debate, this issue came up a little as well. We've signed up to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Yep.
And in that covenant, there is protection for religious freedom, for the rights of the child, that I don't think are faithfully adhered to in some of the legislation that's been progressed for same-sex marriage. Myself and George Brandis tried to move some amendments to effectively enshrine the ICCPR
I remember
clauses.
That well.
George being a prominent supporter of same-sex marriage, but I worked with him to try and get some kind of consensus. Well, it was pretty dispiriting that even that limited attempt to protect someone's ability to defend a traditional view of marriage. George supported people's right to be able to defend a traditional view of marriage, but even that attempt failed. It was, I think, one of the closest votes on the amendments in the Act. It was pretty close, but it still failed.
I can't remember how each of those votes. I do remember those amendments very well. I do remember George also being a strong opponent of a Charter or Bill of Rights. And I understand where you're coming. I'm not here to sort of pick you up necessarily, but I know the intent is to protect freedoms, and that's the discussion that we've got to have, because we seem to have some very flawed anti-discrimination laws. Section 18C of the Federal Racial Discrimination Act, which you just mentioned, mirroring legislation at state-based level, and that's what's tripped up Senator Chandler, it's what's tripped up me. That's what those amendments were trying to achieve at the end of the same-sex marriage debate, to make sure those anti-discrimination laws weren't weaponised, which of course they have been in a post-same-sex marriage world, and I guess there's some unfinished business there to protect freedom of speech.
Maybe if I can better clarify my emerging views on this issue is I think let's take away the loaded label of Bill of Rights. The real issue is, should we have a positive protection of free speech, so that it's sort of, the default is you can say whatever you like, and then there will be obviously some limitations regarding defamation, slander, those sort of things, and vilification, incitement to violence. All those things should be illegal. Or do we sort of start with a restrictive view and then prescribe these are the things you can say that are sort of whitelisted? And I suppose this whole experience of the Folau debate, same-sex marriage, and some of the restrictions in the coronavirus maybe started to put me in the camp that maybe we do actually need to say forcefully in our law that we live in a society where the default option is you can say what you like. as I say, it's never going to be completely
Yeah,
unrestricted.
subject to defamation
exactly.
laws. You can't yell fire in a theatre, that sort of, and
Yeah.
incite violence. I mean, I
That's
think
right.
definitely inciting violence is where we should draw the line.
Yeah.
But offending someone, vilifying, these very
Yeah.
subjective words, which are in our anti-discrimination legislative architecture, are now being weaponised by activists. But a good discussion, Matt. I want to talk about some other things as well. I've been following your contribution to the national debate on energy policy, and particularly the issue of coal and coal-fired power stations. I have friends, I'm sure you do as well, who are good conservative people, vote Liberal, National all the time, but go and hear Al Gore when he's in town and are really concerned about climate change, and of course we should be concerned about climate change, but they think that you can run a modern economy on wind and solar power, and I think we'd all like to think that you could do that, but you just can't, can you?
Look, I've been pretty consistent on this issue. I'm not anti-renewable energy.
No, and I'm not either, but you want the lights to stay on and jobs to stay here.
I've got solar panels on our own roof. Well, it was a house we bought. I probably wouldn't choose to put them up. But I didn't take them down, let's put it that way. So I didn't say, okay, let's go get rid of them and destroy this type of energy.
You're showing your true colours now.
I wasn't that proactive in that regard. So I'm not against these forms of energy, but they've got limitations. And you're right to point out that there are some who want to be blind or I think sometimes willfully blind to the limitations of newer forms of energy. And when I say newer, I mean, we've used the sun and wind as human beings for centuries, long before coal-fired power was in place to provide energy. There are, of course, new techniques and tools like wind turbines, modern wind turbines, photovoltaic cells, which are capturing that in a more efficient way. But you still can't run them when they're at night. You still can't do it when the wind doesn't blow. I mean, something simple, we're getting our roof replaced at the moment because we had some hail around this area and some people are in there. If we were completely solar, I got home and the roof of our balcony's off, and I thought, what would we be doing right now if we just had solar panels and batteries? We wouldn't have power for a few weeks, basically. But because we're hooked up to the grid, we've got coal-fired power, we've got gas-fired power, we've got these types of power. So the question is, are we going to keep all of these types of power as just simply backup for the future when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow? If we do that, our power will end up being very costly because all these things have to be paid for just to sit idle. And a coal-fired power station sitting idle costs a lot of money. And I don't think it's particularly smart. I think the coronavirus has shown how important it is to get our manufacturing sector back. And we're not going to have a strong manufacturing sector on renewables alone.
Our policy of taxpayer subsidised renewable energy over the last decade or more has resulted in our electricity prices going through the roof. We're losing baseload power from the grid. We've seen it in Victoria. We've seen blackouts as a direct result of the loss of coal-fired power stations there. We know even Malcolm Turnbull was begging AGL not to close down Liddell Power Station. There's a real crunch point coming there. The Prime Minister's announced gas to be the firming baseload ingredient there. It does seem, and you've pointed out quite controversially, I suppose, that in South Australia they could have spent $26 million on upgrading their coal-fired power station. They chose not to and spent, I think, $300 million on gas. And we're about to do that at a national level when this next crunch point comes in New South Wales. Why is it that we can't carry a debate in this country or carry the people with us to use our most abundant and cheapest form of energy instead of putting a gas-fired power station in the middle of one of the biggest coal reserves on the planet?
I suppose I'd somewhat question the premise you've just put at the end there. I don't think building a new coal-fired power station would be unpopular.
Well, sorry, I don't either, but it seems like politics doesn't want to carry the debate.
Well, I suppose some it would be controversial.
You do.
It would be controversial. You wouldn't get 100% support.
No. As you won't for gas either.
That's right. You'd have a significant minority opposed to a new coal-fired power station. I think they would be a minority. There's a poll taken recently in Townsville, and yes, Townsville's not the country, but a poll in Townsville showed 80% support for a new coal-fired power station. Go Townsville. I think it'll probably be similar here in Rocky. So I suppose my concern is there is some degree of willingness to compromise on these issues in these debates, rather than show a certain level of leadership and say, okay, let's do this. Our goal is to bring manufacturing back, get energy prices down, and we're going to do whatever we can to get to the goal.
Which is fantastic. I mean, it's great to see that.
We're all too focused on the means and trying to get people to support the means.
And is that because the debate has run away from us over the last decade or so, as the Greens and the left of Labor and the media have carried this climate alarmist narrative? I mean, even some of the environmentalists are walking back from this. Michael Schellenberger, even Michael Moore himself has pointed out that renewables can't do the job in his film, and of course Bjorn Lomborg just says, look, we're spending all this money, it's not efficient, we're better to adapt rather than destroy our economies. I mean, but I don't think the public people who don't read the Australian newspaper don't understand any of what I've
But again,
just
we're
said.
not losing the debate.
Well, we have in that we don't feel like there's enough political capital to say, let's replace Liddell.
Yeah, sure. That's a decision that's been made in the last few months. But in terms of the public debate, every time the coalition or the Conservative side of politics has gone forward and said, we're going to oppose a carbon tax, we're going to back the Adani.
You've been backed by the electorate.
We've won.
Yeah.
We've won and won easily. And keep in mind now, Labor has dropped their 2030 target.
That's right. So yes, you are making big. And Anastasia Palaszczuk just approved a big Olive Downs mine.
Well, Palaszczuk, I probably have time to go into that. She hasn't really approved it, but I won't distract you.
She got a headline to that effect.
She's trying to approve it, and that shows something in of itself. That the past week, the Labor Party here in Queensland have basically spent the whole time talking about coal.
Unbelievable.
They did a deal with Adani. 3 years ago at the election, they were pulling out of Adani.
Exactly.
This time they're trying to desperately show we love Adani.
Yep.
And that so standing up and showing leadership on that issue, on the Adani mine, has changed the country. And I would say the same with yourself and the excellent book you've just written. Political leadership matters. Taking a stance that might be controversial, might not be even majority support at the time, it can make a difference and change the country for the better.
And this is, I guess, the point of this discussion we've been having about free speech and our energy policy. What more can be done, do you think, on the Conservative side of politics? And I guess this is my critique, and it's in the book, that the Conservative side of politics doesn't seem to carry the argument as well and sustain the arguments in the public square in the same way that the crazy left do. I mean, 30 years ago when the Greens started going on about some of these sort of things, they were seen as the fringe dwellers. Now their policy has become almost mainstream, it would seem. And I take your point about the electorate, going with you on certain things. But it's very hard for our... Well, to the point now where we can't just go and build a coal-fired power station because a whole bunch of people in Sydney and Melbourne who are Conservative voters would find that distasteful. So have we got to do more to sustain our arguments and be more, more vocal?
I'm an advocate for showing political leadership on these issues. I recognise that's easy to say as a senator for Queensland. We're support for that, so I understand the difficulty of others. As I said, I wouldn't underestimate the victory we had on some of these points. We are not going to... You made the comparison to the Greens. The Greens didn't emerge 30 or 40 years ago and legislate same-sex marriage the next day.
No.
Or end coal mining the next day. They have adopted an approach of incrementalism that has incrementally, over time, progressed their agenda and has delivered significant victories, political victories for them as a party. We've got to do the same. We've got to incrementally push our own point of view. We are not. If you think that you get involved in politics and within a year everything will be in the world as you see it, well, that's not how it works. You can only change things one step at a time in life, and especially in democracy, where you have to take people with you. So I would say we've made some progress on that. We had the world against us on that Adani mine, and it's up and running. There are 1,500 people
well
working
done. Congratulations.
So that's a great thing for our town in Rockhampton. They're flying out of here.
No,
and we just got to do the same with these other issues too.
And you're dead right. Look, I remember before you worked for Barnaby, I had a little stint working for him and Ron Boswell. And I remember at the time the Greens, led by Bob Brown, were saying we want to end coal mining. This was in about 2006, 2007. And I thought that will never happen. But we're at the point now where we've got major banks who won't fund coal mines. So the point is...
Oh yeah, look, it's not, the war is not over. That's for sure. But as I said, look at the Queensland Labor Party here. They've done an about turn, and what it takes is people just to stand up, right? Like if you want to change the world, you got to turn up.
Yeah, no, and people appreciate you turning up. Matt, just turning to another area of policy that you've been vocal about in the past, and that's tax policy. You're a former economist with the Productivity Commission, very smart man with numbers. You did some modelling some years back that showed that a couple with children, with one parent at home looking after the children, working in the home, doing domestic duties, that they would be penalised by our tax system to the tune of about $10,000 a year. That's a pretty big penalty on a family who want to exercise that choice to have one partner staying in the home.
Yep.
Do you think there's room for more to be done on that and more advocacy?
I think the environment right now is difficult for progress on family-based taxation or income splitting, as it's probably more directly known. I did advocate that. I was still an advocate for it. The difficulty, I'll put it starkly, if we were to move our tax system to the US-based system, where couples can 100% split their income, they can split their income across both parents or both partners in the household, have a full household-based taxation system. That would cost us something like $12 billion a year. Now, we are about to hit $1 trillion in debt. I suppose you could rant and argue, well, what's another $12 billion now? We've gotten used to spending this amount of money. But I do think very soon as a country we're going to have to face some pretty tough decisions about our public finances after the coronavirus all ends. And so shifting and doing tax reform on that sort of scale is going to be very difficult. So I am really keen to try and think about ways we could still do something like this in an affordable way. But those limitations are real ones, and it's just going to make it a little difficult.
Yeah, I take your point about we just don't have a magic money tree, particularly in this current environment, and the debt is a massive issue. But there's an equity issue, though, isn't there? Because there are parents who are both working who are getting essentially taxpayer subsidies for childcare, which the stay-at-home parent doesn't get. So, but that's,
well, how absurd is this? I mean, I don't know if you've followed it much, but there is a big push underway to make childcare free.
The Greens again.
Well, not just the Greens, there's a whole industry saying that's a coronavirus recovery model. So I suppose on this issue it might be more just trying to stop further silly policy than roll back what's there because of the issues of the debt we have. I mean, I'm not against childcare, and every parent has to make their own decision. But paying each other to look after each other's kids, it's equivalent to paying each other to do each other's washing, right? Like if I paid you to do my washing and you paid me to do my washing, my laundry, GDP would be higher. Right? GDP would be higher because we've both just done a money transaction, right? Money's changed hands, we've done each other's laundry. GDP is higher, and that's what you'll hear from the advocates of this of free childcare. GDP will be higher. But no more laundry was getting done, right? We were doing each other's laundry, we were doing our own laundry, and then we just decided to make it part of the formal economy, which GDP measures and captures. As an economist, I know well that GDP is not a precise measure of welfare or happiness or the utility of a good society. It's a proxy for those things, and it's usually a pretty good proxy. But it does fall down when we have these kind of debates and the family gets involved. The one thing we can't forget is I support market economy, capitalism, all those things. That's generally the best way, I think, to organise society and distribute scarce resources. But there still is communism. Communism still exists in our society. It's in every family. Families aren't run on a market basis. And I don't think it should be. Families are run as effectively a little commune, but they're a small commune that works, and they do need to be given distinct value separate to the market system. And
there's always great truth to every lie, of course, and of course we're meant to live in community. You mentioned the washing. You made the news because you, and this is going back to how we started this conversation about political correctness, you erected a clothesline for your wife in your backyard and put that on social media, and all the lovies went crazy over that.
Sometimes I just love. I mean,
you did that on purpose, didn't you?
Well, I crafted it. I didn't put the clothesline up for that reason. It was much more mundane. We did some extensions, and our old clothesline got taken down. But when it was erected, I thought I could have some real fun. The clothesline had been delivered on the Friday before Mother's Day. Purely, absolutely coincidental.
You're an amazing husband.
Chuck it up on the Saturday, and then I put up on Twitter, the missus loves her early Mother's Day present. I knew it was going to happen, if there's one thing that lefties are known for, mate, they're predictable. That's for sure. They predictably went off about that.
Yeah. Well, Senator Matt Canavan, you've been very generous with your time. Appreciate you being on the Lyle Shelton Show, and your voice in this country is very much appreciated, I'm sure, by all our viewers.
Well, thanks to you too, Lyle, and great work on the book. Your listeners should all go get a copy.
Well done. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Senator Matt Canavan. I'm sure you'll agree he is a fine thinker, and he's certainly someone to watch. If you haven't yet got a copy of my book, I kid you not, Notes from 20 Years in the Trenches of the Culture War, can I encourage you to do so? They're available at lyleshelton.com.au. As I keep saying on this show, I've been blown away by the support that I've been getting for the book. At the launch here this week, people drove from the Sunshine Coast to Rockhampton to be at this launch. A man drove down from Mackay, a 4-hour drive, and a woman drove in from Theodore, 2.5 hours west of here. I'm humbled by the interest that people are showing, by the sales figures, over 2,000 copies sold, and I really believe in the message that this book has, what it says about the brokenness of our politics, and how if we can become better educated about what's going on and demand something better from our leaders, both in politics and in the church, we can perhaps see a turnaround in our society from the slide that we've been experiencing. So can I encourage you, get a copy of, I kid you not, Notes from 20 Years in the Trenches of the Culture War, available at lyleshelton.com.au. Well, that's it for me this week on another episode of The Lyle Shelton Show. Let me just say a big shout out to Dave Pello and his team of volunteers at the Good Source News for producing my show. It's a massive privilege to be part of this platform. So thanks again, and please join me again next week for another episode of The Lyle Shelton Show.
The Lyle Shelton Show is a production of The Good Source, hosted by Lyle Shelton. To watch, listen to, or read more content without the SJW PC fact filter, visit goodsource.news. Good, SAUCE.news. Become a Good Source supporter for exclusive access to live and unedited interview recordings, including the conversations before and after the show.